Hey, everybody. Yeah, we've got an awesome panel here, and thank you, George. These are some of the top guys in the entire casino space, both mobile and Lewis coming at it from the desktop and web worlds and moving on to mobile. So I'm really excited to try to get some interesting insights for you guys. At the end, we'll have room for questions, so please save up anything that you're wondering and have always wanted to ask some of the top casino, mobile, and PC developers. So I want to jump right in. And when you're sitting down to start launching a game, you've been working on it for 6 months, talking on the mobile side now. We'll start with you, Nick, actually, because 12 gigs is how many years old, actually? When did you guys start?
About 2.5, 3.
2.5, 3 years ago. Wow, okay. So you guys have been a rocket ship, but 2.5 years ago when you were first starting this company, when you go to launch a game, as a small developer, now you're a larger developer, what are the sort of metrics that you pay attention to? What are the goals? Is it downloads? Is it ranking? Is it lifetime value? What are the goals before you actually go in and start?
I think the most important metric that we look at before we begin like a big marketing push is retention. Monetization can be weak at first, but if your retention is weak at first, it's probably not worth marketing the game. So I guess baselines are something like 55% day 1 retention and then 25% day 7 retention. Obviously, you can learn that within about a week. I guess along those lines, you want to have the opportunity for your app to be in the top new category. So what you'll see a lot of developers do is put their game out in Canada only or UK only, for example. So a valuable English-speaking market, but not the US. So you can kind of make sure you get the retention right, you get the economy right, and then once the numbers look good, then you can go into the US market and burst it or begin aggressive marketing, however you do it.
Do you know, actually, I've always wondered how long the window is for Google or top new at iOS while they still call you new. Does anyone know?
Well, I mean, I think it's always changing, as Google likes to do. And recently, actually, and I think we discussed this, it's new and updated. So I don't know what the definitions are around like what is updated, because we update our apps once a week basically, and we've never been put into the updated category. So I think it's probably some combination of velocity of installs, history on the platform, and recent updates.
Shmuel, how about you guys? When you go to launch a game or you go to make a big marketing push, what are the high-level metrics and goals that you have in mind?
Good morning. So we're sort of a larger company. We're about 500 and something people, and we have teams broken out. You have a game team that focuses on the actual game and product, and I sit in the user acquisition team that focuses on the paid user acquisition metrics. And those are 2 different KPIs to look at during a beta period. Frankly, I don't care about a game's KPIs, even though some of the game product managers will want to shoot me for saying that. Yes, it's important to make sure that the game is doing well, the retention rates look good, and people are monetizing in the game. But that's for the product and the game teams to figure that out. During a beta period, as a marketing person, all I care about are the marketing KPIs. I want to understand what and how much is it going to cost me to acquire a user. I want to understand what are the click-through rates on the different creative. I want to understand how this game is converting. I want to understand what sort of scale we can reach before the game actually launches. So suppose we have a grand marketing plan, or we want to work on a grand marketing plan for launch. I can't really put a plan together for a massive launch unless I have any basic KPIs during a beta period, so I can say, okay, I see what my effective CPM is, I see what my effective cost per install is. I'm working with 5 different partners during a beta period. They estimate that when we do go big and we do launch worldwide, the volume will be 3x or 4x. And so I use that data to build somewhat of a comprehensive plan so that when we do launch, there are no surprises.
How much optimization do you do of the store listing?
Nick was asking how much App Store optimization you do?
Store listing.
Store listing. screenshots on all that good stuff.
Were you asking the question?
Yeah, I'm asking.
You're not leading the panel. John is leading the panel.
That's a good question.
There's so much confusion going on. Okay, so in terms of updating the product page, I am involved very little on a day-to-day basis for the product page. That's usually something that the game teams will focus on. The truth is that the game teams really don't know always what a good conversion rate or a bad conversion rate is. They're not looking at marketing KPIs. And so in a perfect world, it's a marketing team and a UA team that's actually instructing a game or a product team what to do. But usually on a day-to-day basis, not a whole lot of optimization. We do some icon testing during a beta just to see what resonates. What we'll also do is we'll speak to partners and ask them, without any specifics, within our category, is our conversion rate higher, lower, or average? If it's lower, then I go into panic mode, and then I'll run over to the game team, and then I'll just tell something to them that they really won't understand and keep doing the same thing until they make a change. If it's average, we're okay, and if it's better, no changes need to be made.
Louis, you're probably the Income Access is the expert on all things casino user acquisition, not having to do with mobile apps, right? Mobile web, PC web, is that roughly fair? So how do they differ? And tell us a little bit about Income Access and what you guys do exactly.
So we actually started working with mobile casino games in 2007. Some of our first clients were actually doing the WAP casino on old school Nokia phones. And from then till now, I think one thing that hasn't changed is that the most important thing in terms of planning an acquisition campaign is understanding your user flow and your conversion, which is, I think, what Shmuel was sort of attesting to, is you need to really, really look at user flow, especially payments. Look at where your drop-off points are. You look at the biggest brands in the space, at least in real money, the Bet365s and the William Hills. And the reason why they're able to dominate in acquisition is because they've refined their process so well that they're converting much better than other brands, and they're getting better lifetime player than other brands, which means they can afford to spend a lot more on a player. So it opens up channels that other brands maybe couldn't afford to enter because they're not converting or they're not retaining as well.
That's good. In fact, you bring up an interesting point about the whole casino space in general. There's sort of an understanding, or maybe it's not true, out there, that casino games have really high lifetime values, therefore they can spend a lot on user acquisition in general across mediums. But I was actually on it was Google Play, I think, going down the top grossing casino games, and I got down to like 400, 500, and started to become a blur. It seems very competitive. So is it true that casino games, just by their nature, have higher LTVs than other categories, or is that kind of a myth? Anybody?
It kind of depends on your math. It depends on the content. So you can have a slots game that looks like another slots game but does not monetize nearly as well, and therefore doesn't justify the payouts that a slots game that does monetize well does. But I would say if you got to 400, probably the top 200 monetize relatively well. What would you say an average LTV is of a slots player for a mobile app?
I'm not allowed to say.
Okay. Well, it warrants bids as high as 8, 10, 12, even like $16 in some cases.
Wow.
Which
in
are
in real money, it's obviously
Even way higher, right?
400, 500, right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on market. Right now, I think you had some U.S. brands in New Jersey recently say that a lifetime player is looking over $2,000.
Wow.
Yeah. And in Europe, you have as high averages with some brands of over £1,000.
I wanted to ask you that exactly, because Bettable put out some statistics at one point that when a mobile game in the UK or whatever is real money,
yeah,
the lifetime value is something like 200 times or something. You're saying those are real? You've seen that?
Yeah. Interestingly, at least until sort of like last year, a desktop casino user in real money was more valuable than a mobile user. I'm not sure if that translates over. Shmuel would have to tell me if that's the same in your space.
We don't have much historical experience on the desktop side, so I really couldn't give you a comparison.
Shmuel, in general, there's the space, the user acquisition space in mobile for casino, it feels like it's changing every 3 months. There's always new tools and trends and things emerging.
Just want to correct you, every 3 minutes.
Every 3 minutes, sure. Yeah, more and more, right? So, you hear about video and retargeting, incentivized. We've been hearing for years now, unincentivized. What's your sense of the landscape? What do you like? What don't you like? And what are especially some emerging trends or tools that people should know about here? Big picture.
Okay, so big picture, things that I like. Channels that are ROI positive. It's really what we're going after. And I really don't care what the medium for that is. And usually that'll span across all the type of channels you mentioned, whether it's channel, whether it's social or search, in-app advertising. We do TV advertising, that's way out there, and we can discuss that a bit later.
Yeah, so let's zero in on one, I guess. So retargeting on mobile, have you had any experience with that? That seems like a really, really new thing. Have you guys played around with that yet? Like I literally started hearing about this weeks ago.
So the retargeting, the most encounters I have with retargeting is ad networks continuing to tell me to retarget. That's the retargeting. They keep retargeting me to try their retargeting products. It's working because they're retargeting me all the time. Sometimes conversations with ad vendors that are running out of inventory sounds like this. Retargeting, 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 retargeting. So the focus of our team is to bring new users. And then we have a product and game team that's their job is retention and monetization. And so our team does not do anything retargeting because that does not fall into bringing new paying users into the game. Now, true, if you do retargeting, the argument from the ad networks is that it will raise your LTVs, but that's really not what I'm going after most of the time, because assuming that I have a decent LTV as it is, it's really more about filling a pipeline of more users versus hitting the same people over the head many times.
So speaking to the new users, you said that your favorite channels are the ROI positive ones. Give us one or two that you like. What's the meat and potatoes?
All of them. So all of those that you mentioned before are all ROI positive. Now, if you're looking at a channel that is lower quality, it doesn't necessarily, by the way, I just want to explain something on the incentivized side. Just because a user has some sort of incentive to watch a video doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be a bad user at all. If that were the case, people wouldn't be spending on those networks. And so as long as a user is not incentivized to make a download or to make an install, I would think that, or I actually see that there is just as good quality from those channels. So again, it has usually less to do with the specific channel we're on and more to do with the targeting. So for example, if we're doing something in-app advertising, the stuff that's going to be most successful are things that are contextually relevant. So advertising in other games that have similar overlap, like casino titles or blackjack or poker. Same thing when you're advertising on a social network. Without even getting into specifics, suppose there was a large social network company that did a lot of mobile app installs, and their CEO name was Mark. And so on those channels, you can actually target people who have interest in casino. And so it has less to do about the specific channel that you're in and more to do with the targeting within that channel. And the same thing will apply with any network, because even if it's a blind network, if they're passing you sub-publisher IDs, and if they're not, and you work on a UA team, you should be shot with a rubber bullet, nothing.
Nick, do you feel the same way? Do you feel like all channels are created equal? It's just a matter of targeting within them, incentivized, unincentivized, video?
I think that the channels, so it's always a game of the chicken or the egg. And when a new network comes out, they might have great ad serving technology, which means they certainly have the potential. But unless they have similar partners that are providing the inventory for the demand, you're probably not going to get great installs from that network. So if I'm running on a network that only has casual Candy Crush type inventory, I'm not going to get great installs from that. I will get installs. They will be measurable. There's probably a point at which I know that I can make these bids and run ROI positive. But if you go on a network that's already publishing Double Down or Playtika or whoever, very similar games, that's where we get our highest quality users.
How about you? Go ahead.
Sorry, the great thing about Facebook is Double Down, Playtika, us, I'm sure Big Fish. If you're publishing ads, you're hiding them from your most valuable users. If anyone has spent or demonstrated an intent to spend, I'm not going to show them an ad. But on Facebook, the developer doesn't have the control there. So I can target users from similar properties, and I will also be getting their spenders.
Interesting. And Lewis, how about you? You know, in your world, as you help developers of from all different mediums, what channels do you guys find are the most effective?
So I think obviously what Shmuel says is it's all about targeting. But with that being said, I think one thing that we find we see a lot of people tending to over-focus on the channels that are giving them ROI now, and not as much always thinking about where you're going to get ROI in the long term. I'll give you an example. In real money, obviously, organic traffic is extremely valuable. It takes a long time to get there. When a new brand launches, they'll tend to say this sort of oh, I'll deal with that tomorrow. Oh, I'll deal with that tomorrow. Oh, we got to focus on, if I spend 50,000 today on Google, I'm going to get a certain number of users, and I'm going to know exactly the value on that. However, we know that in the long term, the brands that are able to, reach those organic listings obviously do much, much, much better in the long term. So I think you have to sort of suck it up and say, all right, we know that if we're planning on this company being successful in a year or 2 years down the road, we need to start investing in the organic and building up our organic social traffic as well, investing in content and doing some of those things that actually bring value. One more thing I want to say just about ROI traffic. Obviously, with affiliates, it's a very successful channel because most of the deals that we tend to work out are based on acquiring a user. So you're doing a CPA or a rev share relationship. I think the nature of iGaming affiliate industry really cultivated because the rev share relationship was sort of the standard, so that cultivated affiliates or publishers in this case that were trying to build content to attract high value users. So a lot of the content is very much about really engaging around strategy. For a slots user, it's around the rich content experience, so attracting people who are particularly attracted to certain titles. Obviously, being able to segment users based on whether they're bonus hunters, so building out organic pages that are around bonuses and building out other pages that are more around specific titles or content, and then being able to create custom offers that fit each of those segments. I think that really contributes to bringing in an overall a more high-value user.
All right. Go ahead, sure.
I just wanted to elaborate on something I said before. So typically, it's not as black and white as this is a good channel or a bad channel. Most channels will have a mix. So for example, if you're running on Facebook, you can look at the overall channel going, hey, this is ROI positive or this is not. And some people will be like, hey, this is ROI positive, great. We're doing a great job, on to the next thing. And if it's bad, they'll say, hey, this is not working and shut it off. But each channel that you're doing is so multifaceted. So for example, in Facebook, you could be running 50 campaigns or 100 campaigns. And so usually you're not going to find that all campaigns are bad or all campaigns are good. And that's where people who are focused on marketing should be doing, is going into a campaign and understand, why is this good or why is this bad? Yeah. And so with bad channels, it's about finding, hey, the specific traffic sources that they're sending you. And again, it's a simple request to a partner if they're not already passing you back, sub-publisher parameters to pass those back. Whether it's anonymous or not, it doesn't make a difference. And being able to hone in on the good and the bad, and then effectively create what's called whitelist and blacklists.
Nick, I wanted to ask you actually about exactly that. How do you tell whether a campaign, has been good or has been bad? Let's talk about data and tracking. What business, first of all, how do you determine that? And then maybe delve into what BI tools you like and whether you should build them yourself or pay to use others.
So the marketing KPIs are going to be click-through rate and conversion rate are the two highest level ones. You want your click-through rate to be high because it's demonstrating interest, but even more importantly, you want users to convert once they get to your landing page or the store listing.
Are there rough ranges there, by the way? When you open up a data page and you're looking at click-through and conversion, what do you like to see?
It depends on the ad unit and the network. So like a banner obviously is going to have much smaller click-through rate, where an interstitial or a video is going to have higher. Generally, incented videos do have slightly lower conversion rate than non-incented videos. But to Shmuel's point, it's a user who's been incented to watch a video still might be very high quality. But after your click-through and conversion, the downstream data is really, really important. You can be getting loads of users for really cheap prices and like just watch your DAU grow and grow. But if you're not making any money on those users, it really should not be considered a successful campaign. So we pass additional parameters in. To your point, we use an attribution partner called Adjust. Very similar to Has Offers and AdX, both of whom we've worked with. Tune. Yes, excuse me. Tune. Very similar to Tune.
It's called Adjust, ADJUST? Adjust?
ADJUST, yeah. Also known as AdEven. The product is called Adjust. The company is
Why do you like it better than all these other big guys in Kochava and Tune?
Well, one, Tune/Has Offers has no more relationship with Facebook, which is kind of devastating. That made them a non-starter for us. AdX was acquired by Criteo. I think the attribution portion of their business became basically just a lead gen for Criteo, whereas Adjust, this is what they're focused on. They do a really good job with it. It's a very visually directive dashboard, for lack of better terms. The best documentation. Our engineers actually said that it's the best integration.
So it sounds like you guys use third-party tools just for simplicity. You're not spending a lot of time building your own internal stuff.
We could actually use both Google's and now Apple's attribution to feed that into our own system, but these are affordable, off-the-shelf, third-party products that I think are actually worth investing in.
Louis, in your business, what are the top data tools, or what kind of business intelligence do you guys recommend developers to use?
Well, we would start
Yourselves?
we would start with ourselves. There you go. Not sure if it's, yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Our tool, I think, is it's very valid in an industry where there's a lot of player value and a lot of differentiation player value.
So to clarify, sorry for the audience, so your tool is the one you're talking about is analytics for real money gaming across mobile, web,
yeah,
PC?
So our platform, it was initially designed to be an affiliate management platform. We've built it out to now have an ad serving tool, a mobile tracking tool, so it really allows you to track your acquisition across all channels. And it's particularly good in rich player data in the back end, so the lifetime player value is tracked very clearly to source. So that's, yeah, we tend to be biased towards
Income
our tool.
access plug, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Shmuel, I was talking with to get a little bit wonky on the data and sort of, if you were talking to the ad networks out there and data guys out there and Google and Apple out there, what should change? I had a friend tell me that they were running campaign with, I forget which ad network it was, and they were telling this casino developer, that they were getting 10, 15 installs attributed to this ad network a day. And then sort of over here, they ran a huge burst campaign, got to the top of the rankings, and lots of downloads were coming in organically. Well, lo and behold, all of a sudden, this ad network said, "Hey, we're feeding you, 500 downloads a day," and the implication here is that the attribution windows are so long that this ad network was clearly, it seemed, attributing installs to themselves and asking for money for those installs for something that kind of happened orthogonally. What is your view on attribution windows and sort of how accurate this tracking is right now?
So we typically like to keep attribution windows equal among partners. Otherwise, it creates attribution envy, where people are like, hey, how come their attribution window is longer?
And I should clarify, just for anyone, so attribution windows means if I'm an ad network and I say, hey, I'm going to put ads out for your app, oh good, somebody installed it. If the window is 28 days, they may have seen that ad and then 27 days later happen to install it, and I'm taking credit for that install. That's the controversy here.
So, a few things. I I used to work in the e-commerce space, and attribution and double counting and efficiency was definitely a priority. It's more challenging when you're working for a hyper-growth business, and your focus is more about top-line growth, making sure that you're staying ROI positive, but not squeezing out as much as you can possibly squeeze out. And so, for a smaller company, it's definitely the right thing to do. For a big company, it's probably a great thing to do too. There's just only so many things we get to do in a given day, and I can probably spin cycles from today to the end of time trying to perfect my attribution window, and it's never going to be perfect. And so most of my time is spent focusing on my top priority, which is trying to get most of it right by bringing in new quality users. Another tip I want to give, well, the first thing wasn't a tip, so it was just a statement. So just a tip I want to give is that has offers, Tune, mobile app tracking, has a feature called assists. So for those of you who play basketball or watch basketball, hockey, soccer, so you know that there's somebody who scores and then there's somebody who does the assist. And they're both very valuable. And you can look, has offers has this readily available out of box. It's just a parameter to add when you're doing a search, which is, how many installs is a vendor driving you, and how many assists are they driving you as well? And so you may have a partner that's not driving a ton of installs, but if they're driving a ton of assists, that's just another way to evaluate a partner and figure out how to give them some sort of credit. Another thing is doing the reverse, which is, hey, partner X just drove me 5,000 installs. Where was the original click coming from those installs? And if they're all coming from somewhere else, then you know that these guys just came in towards the end and took credit for it. And so, you have to devalue some of the installs that they're giving you as well.
I wanted to touch, Louis, on the platforms, and with Shmuel and Nick, I'll ask you about Google versus iOS for developers out there looking to launch a casino game on one or the other. But Louis, you guys kind of have visibility across even beyond mobile, web, desktop. If you were starting a casino property today, what platform would you choose? Real money or not real money? I think I know what you might say there. What do you think is sort of the biggest greenfield right now for people in the casino space?
A big push of our development right now as a business has been in the U.S. market and looking at opportunities. I think a lot of the people who were in this space prior to 2006, when the market first became technically illegal, a lot of the publishers and the people that have the traffic in this space in the U.S. are now looking at this market again and saying, all right, if we want to be able to legally promote and be engaged in this market in the long term, as it's now starting to open back up, we have to sort of like come clean and play legit. And so what's really interesting is that a lot of these publishers who have traditionally only worked in real money gaming have now started to look at other opportunities in terms of what's legal that they can promote. So they're taking the offshore illegal brands off their sites and looking at other opportunities. So this is where we've started to really delve into social more and look at opportunities for, where you can promote a social game in lieu of promoting where there is no opportunity, or where you can promote horse racing in states where that's legal, or fantasy sports, or, the list goes on. So
right.
The U.S. market is where we're really focused because we know this is a huge value market, and there's a lot of real money traffic here, and in the meantime, what kind of offers and games are going to, fit with that traffic.
Nick, let's talk about Apple and Google. So what goes into your calculus about which platforms to launch on between those two? How do you see them both treating casino properties right now? I know Google Play recently split out some of those casino categories. Talk to us a little bit about what you like and don't like about these platforms. I'm not even sure. Are you on Apple? Are you guys on iOS? Yeah. So.
All of our apps are Apple or iOS, Android, and Kindle, actually. I think Kindle really does need to be in the conversation. Not nearly as large of a network as Google Play or the App Store, obviously.
How much, I've been asking everybody this, how much smaller? I know that the ARPUs are really high on Amazon, but I hear different fractions, but what size do you guys see compared to Google and Apple?
Well, I mean, it's probably a more meaningful percentage of our revenue than it is a corresponding percent of the size of the other two networks. I would guess maybe somewhere around 10% the size.
Yeah, that's what I hear. Yeah.
Yeah.
Revenue-wise or volume?
Volume-wise, in terms of number of users.
Okay.
But the per-user revenues are much higher, and therefore we're able to bid higher for more
It's
users.
pretty much the same Android title. You don't have to really build a whole new port or anything, right?
It's a forked version of Android. So if you already have an Android title, you can't exactly just put it over there. You still have to do all the native level integrations, in-app purchases, things like that. But it's a pretty easy port, yeah. So love Kindle. I think definitely needs to be part of the conversation. Apple, everybody knows, has somewhat higher LTVs than Google Play. We get a lot more organic users from the Play Store than we do on Apple, so it kind of balances each other out. You kind of alluded to the fact that Google Play, it used to just be it was cards and casino, and then they broke out cards and casino separately. And now within the casino category, you have blackjack and poker up at the top, and then like staff picks, and then slots and roulette. And it's been pretty static for the last 2 weeks, I would say, 3 weeks maybe.
And you guys have a choice of, you just tick a box of where you want the app to appear in those segments?
So you tick a box that says whether you're cards or casino, but then they kind of put you into whatever subcategory underneath casino. And I don't really know what the rhyme or reason to it is. I think it's somewhat half-baked and being experimented with right now. But to me, it indicates the fact that they're going to get much more granular within the casino category. So you will have the blackjack subcategory, the poker subcategory, the slot subcategory, and so on.
So it's early days, but from what you've seen so far, if someone has a blackjack game, let's say, that they're building right now, should they be choosing cards or casino? Someone told me, I thought that they sort of defaulted everybody to one and you had to choose the other. Or
I think if you were in cards and casino, you were defaulted to casino, and if you wanted to be in card, you had to select.
So that seems to imply to me that cards is more of a open vacuum, less competition.
So we actually have one of the higher ranking card apps. It's our bingo app, whereas we put our blackjack app in casino, and we're finding actually that as we've switched from the cards to the casino category, the value of the users actually is better from the organic discovery within the subcategory.
Interesting. Shmuel, what about you? Google, Apple, what are you seeing happen right now? What do you get more excited about, and what do you want them to change?
First of all, I am shocked that you didn't even ask about Windows Phone. Talk about a vacuum. I'm from Seattle, so representing. Now back to Google and Apple. I have actually no preference between the two. We've seen more growth year over year or month over month, sometimes with Android versus iOS, and that's just because we are still catching up on Android, and so the growth that we're going to see, it looks bigger, not necessarily dollar-wise, but percentage-wise, so that's definitely a great growth opportunity. Big Fish in general, we have, believe it or not, games that are not casino, lots of games, and a lot of those games fall into hidden object genre, and hidden object games play much better on tablets than they do on phones. And that's because it's much easier to find a tiny little object on a tablet than it is to find a tiny little object on your phone. It's physics. So as a result, when we're porting games that are hidden object in nature, we'll start with iOS or just default to iOS because there really is not that much of a tablet market in Android. I mean, I know that's growing, but if you think of the economics of it, what is the cost of an iPad versus an Android tablet? I mean, these days you can get an Android tablet from gas stations if you fill up a full tank of gas. That's how inexpensive they are today. And so most people just buy them for their kids. It's cheaper than a notebook today. Just get your kid an Android tablet. They're disposable at this point. And so as a result, the barrier to entry for somebody having these devices is not that high. And so you can imagine the monetization follows. But so we have, I think, just a built-in bias sometimes for iOS, but that has nothing to do with the platform and more to do with the game mechanic.
Okay. Nick and Shmuel, I want to ask you, and then I'll ask you, Lewis, as well, about these social platforms and how do they apply to user acquisition, Facebook and Twitter. I think in the past year, you're really starting to hear about Twitter just the past couple of months, but Facebook has really taken off. They just reported their earnings. App install ads are driving a lot of their revenue. I talk with a lot of developers who mostly seem to like the platform. I've heard it's getting a little pricier. What's your take on Facebook and the prospects for Twitter, Nick?
I love advertising on Facebook. It is getting pricier for sure. I think more and more people are realizing it's a really viable channel. To Shmuel's point, you'll find campaigns that absolutely do not work on Facebook, but if you pause those, I think very often the blend is really ROI positive. I do think, and I said this earlier, but a large part of that is that if I'm showing in-app ads on other casino titles, there's a very small chance that I'm actually going to be showing ads to spenders, where on Facebook I'm getting the entirety of the audience, inclusive of the spenders. So just do the math there. We spend anywhere between 50 to 75% of our budget on Facebook on a monthly basis. We work with managed PMDs, so people that will actually run your campaigns for you. And then we also use Nanigans as a tool set. It's just, Power Editor is a pretty useful tool, but it's a complete bear to work with. So I would consider using a tool set that makes, yeah, I'm being nice. They are a publicly traded
I think I opened Power Editor once and I stared at it for 6 seconds and then I closed it and I didn't want to look at it again.
It has the power to turn you away.
They actually rebranded to Powerless Editor.
And how about Twitter, Nick?
So Twitter, I have not run on, so I can't speak from experience. I'm a little bit skeptical for casino titles. I can see how it can be a really good channel for non-casino titles. But we have a Lil Wayne slots game, so I think that will be something that we'll test on Twitter. The targeting is obviously going to be a little easier with the IP of Lil Wayne.
Shmuel, how about you, these social platforms in context of UA?
First of all, is that Lil Wayne game out yet?
Yes.
It's
Awesome.
doing well.
I have what to do on the plane back. So Facebook, let's see.
And I'll just add one more
Twitter.
layer. What kind of tips can you give these guys of how to use it best? I think we've all experimented with it and found, okay, that looked cool on paper but didn't work. And so any tips you can do on how to optimize as well?
Okay, so just one secret, because I know we were supposed to, this was about secrets from UA. By the way, you should have seen my boss's face when I told him that I'm going to a conference speaking about all our UA secrets. He almost canceled my trip. But I do have lots of proprietary information to share with you. That's why my company sent me here. So if you have any detailed questions about our financials and our growth, please hit me up afterwards or just ask publicly. I'm happy to answer you publicly as well. So just because we're a large company and we're a successful company doesn't mean we do user acquisition better. No, that sounds crazy. We probably do user acquisition worse than my friend Nick here, and that's because when you are dealing with larger budgets, it gets harder and harder to be as efficient. And so for those of you who are working with smaller budgets, cherish it. I came from that a while ago. So my point basically is that, again, I can share some thoughts on Facebook, but I wouldn't take it as the gospel. So in general, it does seem like people do have a strong bias to spend a lot of money on Facebook, or majority of their budget. And if that's working for you, great. The challenge with Facebook is that at the end of the day, they still have a finite amount of users. And there is, demand continues to, outsupply whatever supply there is. And so what that ends up happening is driving up the costs, and especially if you have people that are very competitive in the space, again, it continues to drive up costs. And so, I think, one tip is that if you are going to be advertising a casino title, just keep in mind that Facebook is not the only platform to advertise in, because if you put all your eggs in one basket, it is a very competitive space, and unless you really understand what you're doing and you have a lot of experience doing things on Facebook, it's going to be challenging. Another thing with Facebook is we see volatility, lots of volatility, and that's because Facebook, sometimes the CPIs can change as quickly as somebody's Facebook statuses change. It depends. Like we saw with the World Cup, there were a lot more brand advertisers. And so that was just eating up a ton of inventory. And you can't really predict this. I mean, next World Cup, we'll know that when a World Cup happens, lots of times at the end of a quarter, larger companies have amounts, money that they want to blow through, and so it becomes really expensive. And so I think, again, on Facebook, great channel, but remember to diversify just like you would a financial portfolio. On the Twitter side of things, it's very early, very early. I know Nick was saying about it being challenging for the casino titles. In general, casino titles are always a challenge to advertise, and that's because those games are so niche. So again, in general, casino titles, and you're going to have the same exact thing on Twitter, that the majority of the audience on Twitter is not going to be interested in a slot or a casino game. From what I understand, same thing applies to Facebook. The more narrow targeting you want, the more expensive a campaign is going to be. The broader the targeting, the cheaper a campaign is going to be, but the LTVs are going to go down. What we typically try to do is start as broad as possible, and then start whittling down and saying what works and what doesn't work. And so, again, that's what I would do on the Twitter side of things. We have started to advertise on Twitter. It's very early on. Directionally, it looks okay. It's very difficult when you're working on games that you're tracking, a 12-month LTV or a 12-year LTV or a 12-decade LTV. It's very hard early on to have a good idea of where things are going to land. I know that there was a very interesting case study that Has Offers did with 2 Dots, and I saw that they drove I don't know if it was 1 million installs, but it was close to 1 million installs for 2 Dots. I know that they used a lot of broad targeting, both on the interest side, because that's a game that can appeal to a lot of people, and on the geo side of things, that they were just targeting lots of different geos, which also helps drive traffic.
There's so much more I want to get into. Louis, can you touch briefly on social?
I have all day.
Well, we've got 5 minutes left, and I really want to get to your questions. But Louis, can you touch briefly on how social can be utilized in real money, and then we'll take questions from you guys.
Yeah, just to quickly tie in, I think both the guys had great points. So the only thing I would say is just tying back to the long term. Yeah. Long term versus short term, I think you want to look at when you have both paid and organic traffic through both Twitter and Facebook, and what we've seen is that organic traffic from Twitter tends to be more valuable than organic traffic from Facebook. Facebook is more of an engagement tool. Twitter can actually be more of an acquisition tool. So I think if you're looking at your spend both trying to bring in new players but also trying to grow your organic volume through, I think having an active Twitter base may more directly contribute to acquisition than having an active Facebook organic.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a million more questions, but these are all 3 awesome panelists up here. So does anybody, is there a mic going around or anything like that? Sure. We got one right here. From iWin, it looks like.
Win, actually.
Oh, Win, sorry.
What's your typical ROI window? I mean, obviously everyone's looking to get ROI positive acquisition, but some companies usually look at 7 days, 30 days, 6 months. When is the point that you take a look and say this is a profitable, scalable channel in terms of how many days?
I can start.
I think it's a good question, especially when you're comparing to competitive companies that are actually very different. We're undercapitalized, young, scrappy. We really have to see a return within 75 days, 90, I guess. Whereas the Caesars, the IGTs, and presumably the big fishes of the world can actually look at a 12-month ROI window. So that really, really matters in terms of what your payouts are and what you're bidding. So I think that most people are going to see the LTV start to kind of come to truth around 75 or 90 days, but it doesn't fully flatten out. So you've still got another 9 months after that of growth. Oh, if you're good, you can predict on day one. If people are doing things like changing their bets or max betting, you know that they're probably going to be an engaged user. So you can start measuring the quality of a channel on day one within the first session.
Okay, so first of all, in terms of measuring LTV, it depends on the game, right? So if a game doesn't monetize or has retention that people don't stick around after 3 months, then 3 months would be a good time to figure out what, you want to recoup that money in 3 months because they're not coming back. If you have a game that people stick around for a much longer amount of time, then you can stretch your LTVs. We see people playing Big Fish Casino that have been playing the game for over a year and still monetizing. So again, it really has to do with the game and how users monetize within the game. In terms of predicting pretty early on, obviously, the challenge is you can't run a campaign and then tell an ad partner, hey, let's talk a year from now. And I'll let you know if these campaigns backed out. I don't got time for that. So we have an excellent business intelligence team. And what you typically need is usually we like to look at cohort sizes of 1,000 or more users just to be statistically accurate. We also want to make sure that cohort is not sliced by geo. So when we look at 1,000, we want to make sure it's by device or by country. Because if you're going to look at 1,000 users and they're spread across devices, across platforms, across different geos, it's going to mean different things. So again, they look for cohort sizes of about 1,000. And then usually within 2 or 3 weeks, we can get an understanding of what 3 months, 6 months, 12 months will look like. The other thing which is very helpful for LTVs is time, right? So you need a big enough cohort size and a large enough window to really understand what the user behavior is going to be. And so one of the things to keep in mind is make sure to keep an eye on stuff even after you potentially have written off a channel or given it a thumbs up, because all analysis and all predictions can end up being wrong. And so sometimes you can pause a channel and then look back 4 months later and be like, wow, these guys are awesome. I sent them a cease and desist, but now I have to go crawling back and ask them for more traffic. And sometimes it's the worst. You have this great relationship with vendors and they're taking you out to fun stuff. And then in the middle, you got to just break the news that they're sending you bad users. It's a harsh breakup. So even with all the predictive analysis, things can be very unpredictable.
More questions? Yeah.
Yes, this one's for Nick. You said that you use PMDs as well as managing like an internal campaign using like self-service platform.
Mhm.
How do you manage that so that you don't accidentally like bid against
ourselves?
yourself, or maybe like how do you manage that relationship so it, you're optimizing your budget?
We divide it up by geo, actually. So internally, we do Big Four and maybe one additional country, and then all of our international stuff is what's farmed out to the managed PMDs.
Which are the Big Four?
US, UK, Canada, Australia. And then like we might throw in Singapore to be experimental, or France or something like that.
So I personally don't care about bidding against myself because I know I'm going to win. It's a sure thing. But think of it that when you're bidding against yourself, it's not like you're sitting in a boxing match and you're punching yourself in the face. You're also bidding against 50 other competitors or 100 other competitors. So don't think that this notion of bidding yourself up just because you're buying on 2 different places is really going to have a tangible impact on your ECPI.
Hey guys, my question's around creative testing. with what kind of cadence you guys put out new advertisements? And I know that messaging definitely impacts conversion rates, but how strong do you think the correlation is between that first impression, that first copy, that first message that a user comes in on, and how valuable they are down the line?
I would say we do creative refreshes once a week, but if we had infinite resources, we would do them more than daily. It's a very big driver of the quality of a channel and click-throughs, conversions. I'll answer your second part of the question anecdotally. We have a solitaire game, and solitaire is very broad appeal, gets lots of users relatively affordably. And when we turned on a couple of campaigns, we saw the users flood in, and we were really happy with the CPIs. Quality was way, way worse than organic, though, and we were confused as to why. And then we realized that we're advertising solitaire when what we have is Vegas-style solitaire. And when we made it much more clear that there's a wager involved and that there are credits involved, the CPIs went up, the click-throughs went down, the conversions went down, but the quality of the users were far better. So I think your creative has to indicate who you're going after demographically, but also has to really clearly illustrate what your game is and what it's about.
Okay.
I would say with our industry, exclusives are incredibly important. So actually customizing your creative to either co-brand with wherever the partner is going to be promoting it is. And so the user gets a feeling like they're getting something special beyond and above what the average user is getting. Obviously, this is extremely important to attracting high-value users. They want to feel a VIP element and feel like that also creates a sense of urgency, I think, as well. And urgency is really important with banners, I think, limited time offers.
Okay. Well, thank you. This was an amazing panel, standing room only. So you guys did a great job. Thank you so much.